Welcome back to the historian's Tome, where ancient civilizations come alive through gentle narration designed to ease you into peaceful slumber. I'm here with another journey through time, and tonight we're traveling to the crossroads of empires, to a land where silk caravans crossed mountain passes and mighty kingdoms rose from fertile valleys. Before we begin our exploration of the remarkable Bactrian civilization, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more historical sleep stories. I'm curious to know where you're watching from tonight and what time it is in your part of the world. Perhaps you're settling in for the evening in London, or maybe it's already late night in Tokyo. Wherever you are, I hope this tale of ancient Bactria will carry you gently into restful dreams. Let's begin our journey to a civilization that flourished for over a millennium in the heart of Central Asia. In the vast expanse of Central Asia, where the Hindu Kush Mountains meet the Oxus River, there once flourished a civilization that would become the bridge between East and West. This was Bactria, a land whose very name evokes images of golden wheat fields, bustling market towns, and the distant sound of caravan bells echoing through mountain passes. The region that would become known as Bactria encompassed much of what we now call northern Afghanistan, southern Uzbekistan and parts of Tajikistan, a territory roughly the size of modern-day Greece, but with landscapes far more diverse. The earliest inhabitants of this region were drawn by the same features that would attract countless others throughout history. The Oxus River, known today as the Amu Darya, wound its way through the northern reaches of the territory, providing life-giving water to settlements that dotted its banks. To the south, the Hindu Kush Mountains created a natural barrier, but their passes also served as gateways for trade and cultural exchange. Between these geographical anchors lay fertile plains and valleys that could support large populations and extensive agriculture. Archaeological evidence suggests that people have lived in this region for thousands of years. The earliest settlements date back to the Bronze Age, around 2500 BCE, when small farming communities began to take advantage of the region's natural fertility. These early inhabitants learned to channel water from mountain streams and rivers, creating irrigation systems that would form the foundation for later agricultural prosperity. They domesticated animals, cultivated wheat and barley, and developed pottery traditions that would influence regional craftsmanship for centuries to come. The strategic location of Bactria made it inevitable that the region would become a crossroads of civilizations. To the west lay the great empires of Mesopotamia and Persia. To the east stretched the vast territories that would become the Chinese Empire. To the south were the wealthy kingdoms of India. And to the north roamed the nomadic peoples of the Central Asian steppes. This position at the intersection of major trade routes and cultural zones would shape Bactrian civilization throughout its long history. As the centuries passed, the small farming settlements of early Bactria grew into towns and cities. The development of metallurgy brought new tools and weapons, while improved agricultural techniques allowed for surplus production that could support craftsmen, merchants, and administrators. By the middle of the second millennium BCE, recognizable urban centers had emerged, complete with fortified walls, public buildings, and evidence of social stratification. The religion and culture of early Bactrian society appear to have been influenced by the broader Indo-Iranian tradition that spread across much of Central Asia during this period. Archaeological finds include fire altars and other evidence of religious practices that would later be associated with Zoroastrianism, though the exact nature of these early beliefs remains somewhat mysterious. What is clear is that the people of Bactria developed a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that would serve them well in the challenges to come. The wealth of Bactria began to attract attention from the growing empires that surrounded it. The region's agricultural productivity, its control of important trade routes, and its skilled craftsmen made it a valuable prize for any ambitious ruler. By the 6th century BCE, the expanding Achaemenid Persian Empire had begun to cast covetous eyes toward this prosperous land between the mountains and the river. The conquest of Bactria by the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great around 45 BCE marked the end of the region's independence and the beginning of its integration into one of history's largest empires. For the Persians, Bactria represented both a strategic necessity and an economic opportunity. Its location made it a vital link in the communication and supply lines that held the vast Persian Empire together, while its wealth could help fund the empire's continued expansion and administration. The Persian conquest was not merely a military occupation, but a comprehensive transformation of Bactrian society. The Achaemenid system of governance, which had proven successful across the empire's diverse territories, was implemented in Bactria with characteristic Persian efficiency. The region was organized as a satrapy, one of the empire's administrative provinces, under the rule of a satrap who answered directly to the Persian king. This satrap was responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining order, and ensuring that Bactria contributed its share to the empire's military forces when called upon. Under Persian rule, Bactria experienced a period of unprecedented prosperity and cultural development. The Persians, unlike many ancient conquerors, generally allowed their subjects to maintain their local customs and religions as long as they remained loyal to the empire. This tolerant approach meant that Bactrian culture continued to evolve while absorbing Persian influences in art, architecture, and administration. The result was a unique synthesis that combined local traditions with imperial sophistication. The most visible signs of Persian influence in Bactria were the magnificent cities and monuments that began to rise across the landscape. Bactria, the region's capital city, was transformed from a large town into a true metropolis, worthy of its status as a provincial capital. Persian architects and engineers supervised the construction of massive walls, grand palaces, and elaborate water management systems that supported a growing urban population. The famous Bactrian irrigation canals, some of which remained in use for over a millennium, were likely expanded and improved during this period. Trade flourished under Persian rule as Bactria became fully integrated into the empire's commercial networks. Merchants from across the known world passed through Bactrian cities, bringing exotic goods, new technologies, and fresh ideas. The region became famous for its horses, which were highly prized by Persian cavalry units and wealthy individuals throughout the empire. Bactrian craftsmen developed new techniques for working precious metals and producing textiles that were sought after from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. The Persian period also saw significant developments in Bactrian religion and culture. While the empire's official religion was Zoroastrianism, the Persians' tolerant approach meant that local beliefs continued alongside the new faith. Over time, however, Zoroastrian influences became increasingly prominent in Bactrian religious practice. Fire temples were built in major cities, and Zoroastrian festivals became part of the annual calendar. This religious transformation had profound effects on Bactrian art and literature. As new themes and motifs appeared in local cultural production, Persian military technology and tactics were another important import to Bactria. The region's strategic location made it a frequent launching point for Persian campaigns into Central Asia and India, and Bactrian forces became integral to these military operations. Local warriors learned Persian combat techniques and adopted Persian-style equipment, transforming Bactria into one of the empire's most formidable military provinces. The famous Bactrian cavalry, which would later achieve legendary status, first developed its reputation during these Persian campaigns. Education and intellectual life also flourished during the Persian period. The empire's need for administrators who could speak multiple languages and understand diverse cultural traditions created opportunities for educated Bactrians to advance within the imperial bureaucracy. Some Bactrians rose to positions of considerable influence within the Persian court, serving as advisors, diplomats, and provincial governors in distant parts of the empire. This exposure to imperial politics and foreign cultures further enriched Bactrian civilization. The Persian period in Bactrian history lasted for more than 2 centuries, during which the region became thoroughly integrated into the broader currents of ancient Near Eastern civilization. By the time Alexander the Great appeared on the horizon in the 4th century BCE, Bactria had been transformed from a collection of farming communities into a sophisticated province of a world empire, complete with magnificent cities, advanced technology, and a cosmopolitan culture that drew influences from across the known world. The arrival of Alexander the Great in Bactria in 329 BCE marked the beginning of one of the most transformative periods in the region's history. For Alexander, the conquest of Bactria was essential to securing his eastern flank before the planned invasion of India, but the campaign proved to be one of the most difficult and costly of his entire career. The Bactrians, led by Bessus, who had declared himself the successor to the murdered Darius III, mounted a fierce resistance that would test even Alexander's legendary military genius. The conquest of Bactria was unlike Alexander's previous campaigns. Instead of facing the organized armies of established kingdoms, he found himself fighting a guerrilla war against an enemy who knew every mountain pass and hidden valley. Bessus and his allies employed hit-and-run tactics, striking at Macedonian supply lines before melting away into the rugged landscape. The harsh Central Asian winter, which the Greeks had never experienced, took a terrible toll on Alexander's forces. While the vast distances and difficult terrain made communication and resupply a constant challenge, despite these obstacles, Alexander's superior military organization and his personal charisma eventually prevailed. The capture and execution of Bessus in 328 BCE marked the end of organized Bactrian resistance, but it was Alexander's political genius rather than his military prowess that truly secured his conquest. Recognizing that Bactria could never be held by force alone, Alexander embarked on a policy of cultural integration that would have lasting consequences for the region's development. The most dramatic symbol of this integration was Alexander's marriage to Roxana, daughter of the Bactrian noble Oxyates, in 327 BCE. This union was far more than a personal romance. It was a carefully calculated political alliance designed to win the loyalty of the Bactrian aristocracy. The wedding ceremony itself was a masterpiece of cultural synthesis, combining Macedonian and Persian traditions in a celebration that demonstrated Alexander's commitment to creating a truly multicultural empire following Alexander's departure for India and his subsequent death in Babylon in 323 BCE. Bactria became part of the Seleucid Empire under Seleucus the Fur Nicator. However, the region's great distance from the Seleucid centers of power in Syria and Mesopotamia, combined with the independent traditions of its people, made effective imperial control increasingly difficult to maintain. The Seleucid kings appointed Greek governors to rule Bactria, but these officials often found themselves adapting to local customs and forming alliances with native noble families. The Hellenistic period in Bactria was characterized by the gradual emergence of a unique Greco-Bactrian culture that combined Greek political and artistic traditions with local customs and beliefs. Greek settlers, many of them veterans of Alexander's campaigns, established communities throughout the region. But rather than remaining isolated from the native population, they intermarried and created a new synthesis of Eastern and Western traditions. Greek became the language of administration and high culture. While local languages continued to be used in daily life and commerce, this cultural fusion was most visible in the art and architecture of Hellenistic Bactria. Greek sculptors and architects worked alongside local craftsmen to create monuments that combined classical Greek forms with Central Asian motifs and Persian decorative elements. The famous Greco-Bactrian coins, which would later become some of the finest examples of ancient numismatic art, began to appear during this period, featuring Greek inscriptions alongside local languages and combining Greek portrait styles with indigenous artistic traditions. Religion, during the Hellenistic period, reflected the same synthesis that characterized other aspects of Bactrian culture. While Greek colonists brought their traditional pantheon of gods, these deities were often identified with local divine figures or adapted to fit Central Asian religious concepts. Zeus became associated with the sky god Ahura Mazda, while Heracles was identified with the Indo-Iranian hero Verithragna. At the same time, mystery religions from the Eastern Mediterranean gained popularity among both Greeks and locals, creating a complex religious landscape that would continue to evolve for centuries. The economic prosperity of Hellenistic Bactria was built on its continued role as a crucial link in the trade. Networks that connected the Mediterranean world with Central Asia, India, and ultimately China. The region's strategic location, combined with the organizational skills of Greek administrators and the commercial expertise of local merchants, made Bactrian cities some of the wealthiest in the ancient world. Archaeological evidence from sites like Ai-Khanoum reveals a level of urban sophistication that rivaled the great cities of Greece and Asia Minor. By the middle of the 3rd century BCE, the combination of geographic isolation, cultural synthesis, and economic prosperity had created the conditions for Bactria's emergence as an independent kingdom. The weakening of Seleucid control over the eastern provinces, combined with the growing confidence and ambition of the Greco-Bactrian elite, would soon lead to the establishment of one of the most remarkable states in ancient history. Around 250 BCE, as the Seleucid Empire struggled with internal conflicts and external threats, the Greco-Bactrian satrap Diodotus declared independence and established the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. This bold move marked the beginning of what many historians consider the golden age of Bactrian civilization, a period that would last for nearly 2 centuries and see the creation of one of the most culturally sophisticated and economically prosperous states of the ancient world. Diodotus I, whose Greek name meant gift of Zeus, was well positioned to lead Bactria to independence. A satrap, he controlled the region's military forces and administrative apparatus, while his long residence in Bactria had given him deep knowledge of local conditions and the loyalty of both Greek settlers and native populations. His declaration of independence was not merely an opportunistic grab for power, but the culmination of generations of cultural and political development that had given Bactria a distinct identity within the Hellenistic world. The new kingdom faced immediate challenges from multiple directions. The Seleucid king Antiochus II initially attempted to reconquer the rebellious province, but his campaigns met with limited success. The vast distances involved, the difficulty of the terrain, and the determined resistance of the Bactrians made reconquest impractical. More serious threats came from the nomadic tribes to the north and the emerging Parthian kingdom to the west, both of which saw opportunity in the political instability that followed the break with Seleucid rule. Under Diodotus and his successors, the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom developed a unique form of government that blended Hellenistic royal traditions with local administrative practices. The kings adopted many of the symbols and ceremonies of Greek monarchy, while adapting their rule to the multicultural nature of their subjects. Court ceremonies combined Greek protocols with Persian and Central Asian customs, creating a distinctive royal culture that impressed foreign visitors with its sophistication and splendor. The most famous of the Greco-Bactrian rulers was Demetrius I, who came to power around 200 BCE and launched an ambitious campaign of expansion that extended Bactrian influence deep into the Indian subcontinent. Demetrius's Indian campaigns were motivated partly by the desire to control the lucrative trade routes that connected Central Asia with the wealthy kingdoms of northern India, and partly by the need to find new resources to support his growing kingdom. These campaigns were remarkably successful, establishing Greco-Bactrian control over much of what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwestern India. The expansion into India brought new wealth and cultural influences into the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. Indian artistic traditions, particularly in sculpture and architecture, began to influence Bactrian craftsmen, while Indian philosophical and religious concepts found receptive audiences among both Greek and local intellectuals. Buddhism, which was experiencing a period of expansion under the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka, began to gain followers in Bactria during this period, adding another layer to the region's already complex religious landscape. The reign of Eucratides Varishtha, who ruled from approximately 171 to 145 BCE, marked the height of Greco-Bactrian power and cultural achievement. Eucratides was a military genius who successfully defended his kingdom against invasions from both the Parthians and various nomadic tribes, while also maintaining control over the Indian territories conquered by his predecessors. His reign was marked by extensive building projects, including the construction of magnificent palaces, temples, and public buildings that showcased the wealth and sophistication of his kingdom. The art and coinage of the Eucratides period represent the pinnacle of Greco-Bactrian cultural achievement. The famous gold stater of Eucratides, weighing over 20 grams, remains one of the largest gold coins ever minted in the ancient world and features some of the finest portrait work in the history of numismatics. The coin's reverse, showing Eucratides in a chariot, demonstrates the high level of artistic skill achieved by Greco-Bactrian craftsmen and their mastery of both Greek and local artistic traditions. The cities of the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom became centers of learning and culture that attracted scholars, artists, and merchants from across the known world. Bactria, the capital, was renowned for its libraries and schools, while cities like Ai-Khanoum featured Greek-style theaters, gymnasiums, and temples alongside local religious buildings and markets. The kingdom's cosmopolitan character was reflected in its use of multiple languages for official documents and its tolerance for diverse religious and cultural practices. Trade continued to be the foundation of Greco-Bactrian prosperity throughout this period. The kingdom's control over key routes connecting China, India, Central Asia, and the Mediterranean made it one of the wealthiest states of its time. Bactrian merchants traveled as far as Rome in the west and China in the east, while foreign traders established permanent communities in Bactrian cities. This commercial activity supported a level of urbanization and cultural sophistication that was remarkable for such a geographically isolated region. The military organization of the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom reflected its multicultural character and the diverse challenges it faced. The royal army combined traditional Greek phalanx tactics with cavalry techniques learned from nomadic peoples and siege warfare methods adapted from Indian and Persian traditions. The famous Bactrian heavy cavalry, equipped with armor for both horse and rider, became one of the most feared military units in the ancient world and influenced military developments across Central Asia for centuries to come. The prosperity and stability of the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom began to face serious challenges in the late 2nd century BCE as pressure from nomadic peoples to the north intensified. The vast Central Asian steppes had long been home to numerous nomadic tribes who lived by herding animals and raiding settled communities. But around 140 BCE, a confederation of these tribes known as the Yuezhi was driven westward by the expansion of another nomadic group, the Xiongnu, creating a domino effect of migration and conflict across the region. The Yuezhi migration was one of the great population movements of ancient history, involving hundreds of thousands of people and their animals, traveling across thousands of miles of difficult terrain. As they moved westward, they displaced other nomadic groups, creating a wave of instability that eventually reached the borders of Bactria. The Greco-Bactrian Kingdom, despite its military strength and sophisticated fortifications, found itself facing an unprecedented challenge from enemies who fought using tactics and strategies very different from the conventional armies they were accustomed to facing. The nomadic invaders brought with them not only military pressure, but also new technologies, cultural practices, and artistic traditions that would profoundly influence the development of Bactrian civilization. Unlike previous conquerors who had sought to rule Bactria as part of larger empires, the nomadic peoples were primarily interested in settling in the region's fertile lands and establishing their own independent kingdoms. This led to a very different pattern of conquest and cultural change than had characterized earlier transitions. In Bactrian history, the most successful of the nomadic groups to establish themselves in Bactria were the Kushans, who emerged as the dominant power in the region by the 1st century CE. The Kushan rise to power was gradual rather than sudden, involving decades of conflict, alliance building, and cultural adaptation that eventually resulted in the creation of one of the most powerful empires in ancient Asia. The early Kushan rulers, such as Kujula-Kadphises, demonstrated remarkable skill in adapting nomadic military traditions to the challenges of governing settled agricultural populations. Under Kushan rule, Bactria experienced another period of cultural synthesis and transformation. The new rulers adopted many aspects of Greco-Bactrian administrative and artistic traditions, while introducing their own religious beliefs, military practices, and social customs. The result was yet another unique cultural fusion that combined nomadic, Greek, Persian, and Indian elements in ways that had never been seen before. This synthesis was most visible in the art and architecture of the period, which featured distinctly Kushan stylistic elements alongside earlier Greco-Bactrian and Persian influences. The greatest of the Kushan rulers was Kanishka I, who reigned during the late 1st and early 2nd centuries CE and expanded the empire to include much of northern India, eastern Iran, and parts of Central Asia. Kanishka's reign marked the height of Kushan power and the full flowering of the unique culture that had developed in Bactria under nomadic rule. His court at Peshawar became one of the great centers of ancient Asian civilization, rivaling contemporary Rome and China in its wealth and sophistication. One of the most significant developments during the Kushan period was the spread of Buddhism throughout the region. While Buddhism had been present in Bactria since the Greco-Bactrian period, it was under Kanishka's patronage that it became the dominant religion of the empire. The Kushan rulers, perhaps influenced by the Buddhist concept of the Chakravarti or universal ruler, embraced Buddhism as a unifying force that could help bind together their diverse subjects. The famous Fourth Buddhist Council, held during Kanishka's reign, helped establish doctrinal standards that would influence Buddhist practice for centuries to come. The Buddhist art that developed in Kushan Bactria, particularly in the region around Gandhara, represents one of the great artistic achievements of the ancient world. Combining Greek sculptural techniques with Indian religious iconography and Central Asian decorative motifs, Gandharan art created entirely new ways of representing Buddhist themes and stories. The serene, idealized Buddha figures, produced by Gandharan artists, influenced Buddhist art throughout Asia and remain among the most recognizable images in world art history. The Kushan period also saw significant developments in trade and commerce. The empire's control over much of the Silk Road network made it enormously wealthy, and Kushan coins have been found from Europe to Southeast Asia, testament to the extent of their commercial reach. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency across the empire facilitated trade on an unprecedented scale, while the construction of roads, bridges, and caravanserais made long-distance travel safer and more efficient than ever before. The cultural achievements of the Kushan period extended beyond art and religion to include significant advances in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. The multicultural nature of the empire created an environment where scholars from different traditions could exchange ideas and build on each other's work. Indian mathematicians working alongside Greek geometricians and Persian astronomers produced innovations that would eventually influence scientific development across Eurasia. However, like all great empires, the Kushan kingdom eventually began to face challenges that would test its stability and continuity. Internal succession disputes, pressure from revived Persian power under the Sassanids, and the gradual shift of trade routes began to undermine the foundations of Kushan prosperity. By the 3rd century CE, the empire was beginning to fragment, setting the stage for yet another transformation of Bactrian civilization. The decline of the Kushan Empire in the 3rd century CE marked the beginning of the end for the ancient Bactrian civilization that had flourished for over a millennium. This twilight period was characterized by political fragmentation, economic disruption, and cultural change that would ultimately transform the region beyond recognition. Yet even as the old order crumbled, new forces were emerging that would carry forward some elements of Bactrian heritage into the medieval period. The fragmentation of the Kushan Empire was a gradual process that unfolded over several generations. Internal disputes over succession combined with external pressures from the revived Persian Sassanid Empire to the west and various nomadic groups to the north created a situation where central authority became increasingly difficult to maintain. Local governors and military commanders began asserting independence, creating a patchwork of small kingdoms and principalities that replaced the unified empire that had once controlled vast territories from central Asia to northern India. The rise of the Sassanid Persian Empire under Ardashir in 224 CE represented a direct threat to what remained of Kushan power. The Sassanids, who claimed to be the legitimate heirs of the ancient Achaemenid Empire, sought to restore Persian control over all the territories that had once belonged to their predecessors. This included Bactria, which the Sassanids viewed as both strategically important and rightfully theirs. The wars between the fragmenting Kushan territories and the expanding Sassanid Empire devastated much of the region and accelerated the breakdown of urban life and commercial networks. During this period of political chaos, new nomadic groups continued to press into Bactria from the northern steppes. The Hephthalites, sometimes called the White Huns, emerged as a particularly powerful force in the 4th and 5th centuries CE. Unlike the Kushans, who had gradually adapted to settled life and absorbed local cultural traditions, the Hephthalites maintained more of their nomadic character and proved less capable administrators of settled territories. Their rule was marked by the decline of many Bactrian cities and the disruption of the trade networks that had sustained regional prosperity for centuries. The religious landscape of Bactria also underwent significant changes during this twilight period. While Buddhism remained important in some areas, the political instability and economic decline made it difficult to maintain the elaborate monastic establishments that had flourished under Kushan patronage. At the same time, Zoroastrianism experienced something of a revival under Sassanid influence, while various local cults and religious practices reasserted themselves as central authority weakened. Christianity, which had been spreading eastward along the Silk Road trade routes, also gained followers in some Bactrian communities during this period. The urban centers that had been the pride of ancient Bactrian civilization experienced severe decline during the post-Kushan period. Archaeological evidence from sites like Balkh shows abandonment of public buildings, deterioration of infrastructure, and significant population decline. The sophisticated irrigation systems that had supported intensive agriculture for centuries began to break down as the political and administrative apparatus needed to maintain them collapsed. Many smaller towns and villages were simply abandoned as their inhabitants fled to more secure locations or adopted nomadic lifestyles. Despite this general decline, some aspects of Bactrian culture persisted and even evolved during the Twilight period. Artistic traditions, particularly in metalwork and textile production, continued to develop, often incorporating new influences brought by successive waves of conquerors and migrants. The Bactrian language, written in a modified Greek script, continued to be used for official documents and commercial transactions well into the medieval period, serving as a link between the ancient and later periods of Central Asian history. The arrival of Arab Muslim armies in the 7th century CE marked the final end of the ancient Bactrian world. The conquest of the region by forces, under the command of generals like Qutayb ibn Muslim, brought not only new rulers, but an entirely new religious and cultural framework that would fundamentally transform the character of the region. While the Arab conquest was initially resisted, the gradual conversion of the population to Islam and the adoption of Arabic as the language of administration and religion marked a decisive break with the past. Yet even under Islamic rule, some elements of ancient Bactrian civilization persisted. The region's strategic location ensured that it remained an important center of trade and cultural exchange, while local traditions in art, architecture, and craftsmanship influenced the development of Islamic culture in Central Asia. The great medieval cities like Balkh, known as the Mother of Cities, maintained some continuity with their ancient predecessors, even as they were transformed by new religious and cultural influences. The memory of ancient Bactria lived on in Islamic historical writings and folk traditions. Medieval chroniclers preserved stories of the region's pre-Islamic glory, while archaeological remains continued to impress visitors with their scale and sophistication. The coins of the Greco-Bactrian and Kushan periods continued to circulate and be copied for centuries after the fall of the empires that had produced them, serving as tangible links to a vanished world. As we reach the end of our journey through the long history of ancient Bactrian civilization, we can reflect on the remarkable story of a region that served as a crossroads of cultures for over 1,000 years. From its origins as a collection of Bronze Age farming communities to its final flowering under the Kushan Empire, Bactria demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for cultural synthesis and adaptation. The legacy of this ancient land can still be seen today in the art, architecture, and cultural traditions of Central Asia, a testament to the enduring influence of one of history's most cosmopolitan and sophisticated civilizations. The story of ancient Bactria reminds us that the great civilizations of the past were built not through isolation, but through openness to new ideas, peoples, and traditions. In our modern interconnected world, the example of Bactrian cultural synthesis offers valuable lessons about the creative potential that emerges when different traditions meet and interact. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can imagine the sounds of ancient Bactria, the bells of trading caravans crossing mountain passes, the chants of Buddhist monks in their monasteries, the discussions of Greek philosophers in their schools, and the gentle murmur of the Oxus River flowing through fertile valleys where the dreams of 1,000 generations took root and flourished.